Welcome to Underworld UK, where Britain's darkest stories are brought to light. From the gritty streets of gangland London, Liverpool, Manchester and Birmingham, from Curtis Warren to the Cray twins to county lines and modern day true crime, we cover everything. Bringing you new videos every week. Subscribe so that you'll be notified when the next video is put out.
East London. Narrow streets, council blocks, market stalls, a place of ordinary life for thousands. But beneath the everyday, a different economy runs, a trade in drugs, loyalty and violence. At the centre of many headlines and courtrooms over the past decade is one name, the Marley Boys. For residents of Leyton and Walthamstow, the name is shorthand for fear. This is the story of our group, born on the margins of London, became one of the city's most feared street gangs. The Marley Boys emerged in 2015 after it splintered off from the Beaumont Crew gang. On 14th March 2018, Joseph Williams-Torres was shot and killed in Walthamstow, East London, by members of the Marley Boys. Joseph Williams-Torres had mistakenly been identified as a gang member and was not the intended target. Prosecutor Alison Hunter QC said the killing was part of a set of related and retaliatory acts of violence rooted in a dispute between rival groups. In particular, violence had begun to escalate after Marley Boys member Elijah Donnelly was murdered in May 2017. The Marley Boys were reported to be in a turf war with a group known as Priory Court or Higher Mill. One of the defendants accused of murder, Amza ul Haq, had previously been squirted with acid in November 2017, while another member of the Marley Boys was stabbed by a group of individuals in Walthamstow. In December 2018, Daniel Fakoya, a member of rival gang Priory Court, and two other men drove a stolen car into Leyton High Road, territory of the Marley Boys. They were armed with a loaded gun, a knife and ammonia. They encountered and chased four members of the Marley Boys until they ran and hid inside an off-licence. Daniel was later sentenced to 15 years in prison for the offence. The name Marley Boys, sometimes written as Marley Strip, is commonly used in police and journalistic reporting. It's a group that coalesced around the E10 and E17 postcodes, Leyton and Walthamstow. Local researchers and reports described them as part of a broader change in London's gangs, moving from local turf-based groups to profit-driven networks. Since the mid-2010s, studies of London gangs show a shift. Gangs aren't just about local reputation anymore, they behave more like criminal businesses. Country lines, exploitative recruitment of young people, and a ruthless focus on profit are now common features. In Waltham Forest, a local study even warned the phenomenon had moved from postcodes to profits. The Marley Boys' founding members were often reported to have Somali heritage, though the group today is ethnically diverse. Recruitment often targets vulnerable young people, children pulled into low-level roles as runners or couriers, sometimes coerced or exploited. The gang's main income streams are drugs, including country lines distribution and associated violence to protect markets. Reports in 2018 estimated that such networks in the area generated tens of thousands of pounds each week. The Marley Boys aren't a single rigid cell. They include or work with smaller sets. Names like Drive and Marlow, Boundary, Coppermill and Stonydown have appeared in police and community reporting. These links allow rapid expansion and make policing more complex. January 8th, 2019, Leyton. 14-year-old Jaden Moodie was knocked off his scooter by a stolen car and then stabbed. The attack was described in court as a killing mission by attackers who had driven into rival territory. One of the men, Ayub Majdoleen, was convicted and later sentenced to life with a minimum term of 21 years. Another strand of the gang's story is revenge. In November 2017, 18-year-old Kacem Mokrane was fatally stabbed in Walthamstow. Months later, in March 2018, 20-year-old Joseph Williams-Torres was mistakenly identified and shot dead while sitting in a van with a friend. Prosecutors later connected acts of revenge to the same ringleader. One figure repeatedly named in reports is Hamza ul-Haq, a ringleader whose trial later connected him to multiple killings. Courts have described him as responsible for a string of revenge attacks that culminated in at least 2 murders. He received life sentences in recent trials for those convictions. Beyond headlines about revenge killings lies another story: the exploitation of children. Country line schemes move drugs from cities into towns using young runners, often groomed, sometimes threatened. Reports on gangs in Waltham Forest warned of children being coerced into dangerous roles. For families in Leyton and Walthamstow, the impact is daily and practical. Routes to school changed, parks empty in the evenings, people reluctant to open windows at night. The social fabric is strained by grief and fear. Police operations and prosecutions have dismantled some cells and produced high-profile convictions, but policing such networks is complex. High court sentences were achieved in several key cases, showing that the justice system can act, albeit after devastating losses. Yet prevention is trickier. Young people slip in and out of gangs, offenders use low-tech communications or burner phones, and the business model, driven by demand and profit, adapts. Reports argue that responses must be both hard-edged and social. Policing plus targeted youth support, housing stability and education. Members using the group name Marley Strip are active in the UK drill and trap music scenes. This includes artists like Richie, Baby Marney, Riddler, AK, S10th, M1, Rondo Montana. The group was named by Vice as having played a role in the exposure of Somali rap artists. Media stories about gangs often flatten complexity. Names like Marley Boys become shorthand for danger, but they also hide nuance, the social pressures, the exploitation, the different motives of individuals inside the group. It's important not to glorify violence. When we explore gang stories, our job as storytellers is to explain, not to glamorize, to centre victims, communities and facts. The Marley Boys represent a modern problem. Criminal networks that are agile, profit-driven and able to reach into communities through the most vulnerable. Courts have delivered justice in some cases, but the cycle continues as long as the market and the conditions that feed it remain. Understanding is the first step to change. If you live in these communities, there are local services and national helplines. If you need help, reach out. For everyone else, see these stories as a reminder. Crime is rarely simple, and solutions must be social as well as legal. The Marley Boys are heavily involved in drug supply and have a street reputation as a violent and feared group across the borough, the report says. They lead the new economically driven operating model and are less interested in postcode rivalries unless it is to protect their drug market. Younger members have been recruited as drug runners, sometimes operating outside London in enterprises known as country lines, and primary school age kids are said to be increasingly involved in crime, both as victims and perpetrators, including serious violence and child sexual exploitation. The leadership is male and seeks anonymity with little ostentation. It remains unclear what happens to the profits of drug supply. This is what one damning media article said about the Marley Boys. The leader of notorious street gang Marley Boys, who killed 2 young men to avenge the death of his friend, has been jailed for at least 36 years. On November 16th, 2017, Hamza Ohak planned and executed the fatal group stabbing of 18-year-old Kacem Mokrane in Walthamstow, East London. Afterwards, Ul-Haq fled to Pakistan, where he stayed for 4 months. 5 days after his return, he and 2 other men were involved in the mistaken identity murder of 20-year-old Joseph Williams-Torres, who was shot dead as he sat in a van with a friend in March 2018. Both killings were in revenge for the murder of Ul-Haq's fellow 17-year-old friend Elijah Donnelly in May 2017. The murderers were associated with a Marley Boys gang, which had been engaged in a bloody feud with a neighbouring Priory Court or Higher Mill gang in Walthamstow. In 2020, Ul-Haq was found guilty of Mr. Williams-Torres' murder and jailed for life with a minimum term of 28 years. In 2023, he was convicted of Mr. Mokrane's murder alongside Abdurrasak Ali, 26, Luca Griffiths, 21, and Kamil Kazmierski, 23. At a hearing at the Old Bailey, Judge Angela Rafferty jailed the 3 men for life.